Hi folks, John Cordisco back again. Wow. Hell of a game. Round 2 of the Sinquefield Cup played at the Chess Club and Scholastic Center in St. Louis. In my opinion, the best chess club in the world. I wish I lived closer, but oh well, I live in upstate New York. Anyway, this is a game between Magnus Carlsen and Sergei Karjakin. Now this is a black. Karjakin was the challenger to Magnus in the last championship cycle. And I heard there was some bad blood a little bit between the two of them. So now I advanced this part in the game. This is move 36. And I went so far because it's a long game. A long game. And this is the key moment, I think. Karjakin just went rook to b7. Computer's on off screen, maybe a third of a pawn advantage for white. It's basically even. There's opposite color bishops, and this is where Magnus makes a decision. The decision to sack the exchange, and he does it. Rook takes, bishop takes, rook takes, king g6, rook c5. Now he's going to get a bishop and 2 pawns for the rook. Still shows a tiny advantage for white. I think Magnus did this to show Fabiano Caruana, who's also playing in this tournament, who's going to be his opponent this November in London, that this is the way I'm going to play. I'm going to grind it out. And to grind it out, they did. King g3, rook takes. Now he's got a bishop and 2 pawns for the exchange. But I got to tell you, that bishop here on c3, I'll tell you, that's a monster. That's a monster bishop. He's got a good anchor square with the pawn on b2. That's almost as much as a rook. And they'll go through the few moves here. We're on move 44. They finagle around for a while. Of course, that bishop is beautiful, guarding those 2 pawns, and the pawns guarding the bishop. And they maneuver around. And they're got to be just dying physically and mentally. We're on move 52. Now, the 2 time controls are 40 moves and 60 moves. And what happens is on the 60th move, you get a 30-second increment. The other time controls are a delay only. 8-7. They just fool around here. Now, white does not want to trade rooks. That's one of the key things you got to remember at endgames like this. If you got the lone rook, even though you're doing very well, the bishop and 2 pawns, you do not want to trade your only rook. Remember that when you go to play these endgames. And they fool around for a while. We get on b4. Now we're on move 60. It gets to the point now where black Karjakin is ahead, believe it or not, for quite a while on time. 3 or 4 minutes ahead. And it was a little uncomfortable for Magnus. And as slowly as time went on here, Karjakin started using more and more time. And every time that they hit, it was a 30-second increment, which is addition on your time. It got to the point where Karjakin at one point had 4 seconds left when he made his move, which gave him 34 seconds. That's how tight it was. And the pressure was really, really on. I think this is more mental for Karjakin and Carlsen than it was anything else, because these were the 2 that played. And Karjakin lost in a tiebreak for the World Championship. So he's got something to prove here. Rook d6, and these are incredibly complicated. So what Karjakin's basically doing is, he's just moving here. Now you notice he's got his rooks on delayed squares on purpose. Interesting here might have been g6. Then after they played this, it gets a little hairy, but that's basically even. But he went rook to d8, check, king comes back. And they fool around a little bit here. And this is a move that I was really, really surprised. The computer likes rook to d2 for black, and I do as well. Gets the rook behind the king. But a very close second is what Karjakin did. And now they're down to seconds now each. Pawn takes in passant, king comes up, g5, pawn takes, king takes. Now the black king's out in the open. So's the white one. Still shows a small advantage for white only. Also, I wanted to point out, for those of you that are looking at this endgame, look at this color bishop and look at the color queening square here. If somehow they trade rooks, he can give up one of these rooks for two of these pawns. It's a draw. You can't queen. So you got to keep that in mind as well, and I'm sure they were. Rook comes over, rook f7, king e6, and slowly I think Magnus is just keeping the tension. He's keeping the pieces on the board. Rook f6, rook comes over, trade and moves the rook back. King. And this is where now the pawn starts to move. Rook f1, king e4, and this is where Karjakin breaks. This is where he blunders. It's really easy to blunder. I would have just checked the crap out of the white king with a rook on f1, but he decides to go king c6. Now it's an over 2-point advantage for Carlsen, and is climbing on the computer here off screen. Black takes his king, and now his king comes up. Checks him. King goes to c4. e6. Here it comes. Rook starts to check. King comes up. Rook checks. King comes over. Rook checks. Let's get a little bit of time on the clock. He goes king f6. Checks. King comes over. Rook here. Got to guard that pawn. But it's worthless now. He blundered. Rook e1. King f7. Now he brings the rook to d6. Here, rook takes a6. And no matter what he does, he's doomed. He can check him all he wants. The king can just come back around. This rook checks. This rook blocks. It's over. And after almost 6 hours, Magnus Carlsen wins. This is very typical of Magnus. He will take a dead drawn position and grind you into the ground. And this is just classic Carlsen. So, Fabiano, I hope you're paying attention. Another classic, beautiful endgame played. Just kept the pressure on. Well, they're going to say, well, Magnus didn't win it. Karjakin blundered. Well, he blundered because of Magnus' strategy. So there you have it, folks. A great, great game. And I want you all to remember, if you think chess is just a game, you're not playing it right. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.